And I would just like to complain about the translation. It's not a diving bell; it's a diving suit.
I know, it's weird.
Oh,
What
yeah.
does the word
true.
mean? What does the word mean?
It means diving suit.
Okay,
I thought maybe they called the helmets bells.
No, a diving bell was like a case.
Diving
It was
bell,
a
yeah,
big.
it was like an actually big round metal thing.
It really was kind of shaped like a bell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could stand in
a
it.
bathysphere, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's
Yeah,
called.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Or the caisson is the large version of it, which they use to build like bridge abutments.
Okay.
Right.
Well, who wants to kick this off?
Who had seen this?
They discovered the bends while building the Brooklyn Bridge.
They
That's
sure
right, I
did.
remember
And
that.
and it fucking killed the guy who designed the bridge. Like,
yeah.
Wow.
The Brooklyn Bridge, if you've never seen the Brooklyn Bridge Ken Burns documentary, it's fucking incredible.
And
you should
short
watch
too.
it.
And it's
And it's only like 3 parts.
yeah.
Well,
All right.
who'd seen this movie before?
I've seen this before.
I've not.
I've had it on my bucket list forever, you know.
I've seen it before. I remember loving it at the time, and I remember it did a real number on my head. Like, it's a thing I think about every once in a while. This is like still the most beautiful horror movie I've ever seen. I think it is beautifully shot, beautifully acted. At its core, it's a really scary thing to imagine yourself being in. The one thing that I would say watching it the second time with a more critical eye was it wraps up really quickly in the last act. Like the finish to the book seems to happen, and all of a sudden, like now suddenly she's showing him the finished manuscript like published, and then it's over.
And then he died.
That's like months.
he died.
Yeah, he died 2 days.
No, I know.
Days after
I
the
understand
book
that all that, but it was so luxuriously paced up until the last 15 minutes of this movie, and all of a sudden it's like.
You want to watch another 20 minutes of her reciting the alphabet
a year later?
I think that some of the choices that he made in this, like the stuff behind me, like all these shots for the first 40 minutes of this movie,
give or take. Yeah.
Oh, well, the first 40 minutes looked amazing. It was amazing. Beautifully done.
Jerzy Kaminsky, right?
I was
right.
Yeah, it was Janusz Kaminski. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to see if they could pull this whole movie off with a POV point. POV.
I was wondering if it was going to stick with that, and slowly it started to break out.
That's also a bit abrupt.
It had to tell a bigger story, so they had to break out of that thing eventually. But while I was going, it was fascinating because the whole thing it looks like the way you look at things when you're like groggy or out of it. I mean, kind of out of focus and distorted.
And it was very analog. It didn't feel, really digitized
well
or anything.
I like to find out how they did that.
His right eye was fucked up too.
The when they sew it shut.
That sucked, man.
It's like you got so little left. And then at that point, they're going to take something else away.
Right. Well, they don't want sepsis to set in.
Yeah. Oh, I understood the reason. It's just nightmarish. And then they actually give you the POV of the eye.
And
so here it goes. Goodbye. It's like that was sucked.
Wow.
Now, two things about
those doctors were just perfect. I thought. Not many of you knew her, but my first wife, Vicky, had a mini stroke. So I spent a lot of time in the stroke center in Berkeley.
Oh.
And the speech pathologists come in and try and get you to do stuff, and half your face is like melting off kind of thing. But it's interesting because these people come up to you and it's like the doctors especially are like clueless as to what will actually make you feel better. I had this one guy come up, she had ovarian cancer. This one doctor came up to me and he said, I had testicular cancer and it was like devastating. And I'm like, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, what do you say?
I feel seen.
So it's the beginning of Fight Club. But okay, I'm gonna
Sorry.
Sorry, Jerry. I'm actually kind of have to unload in this film. Well, first of all, Julian Schnabel, Schnabel, I don't know how you pronounce it, but Schnabel, he was a fine artist before he did this, right?
He still is. He's a painter.
He's like an artist.
You ever see if he's a
he did 2 films before this. He did Basquiat and Before Night Falls.
I didn't see either of those. I'm balancing
it.
this on the fact that I got out of college and I was still into fine arts a lot because my wife is a fine arts major, and we saw his stuff, and he's a fucking fraud. I mean, it's like giant canvases with dishes stuck in them with throw paint all over him. He's actually kind of a worthless artist who knew how to use the system. So he knew how the high art world worked.
But he's a good filmmaker.
No, he's not. Actually, he's not
He
a good
is.
filmmaker. This is a very much a disease of the week movie, all tarted up with nice cinematography. No, I'm not wrong.
Have you seen? Has anyone seen
There's nothing to this film. It's all about him kind of showing this guy who has a stroke, who is a member of the artist class that he's in. Notice that's what brought.
Yeah, but it's a true story. And has anyone
if
seen?
It's a true story or not?
Recently, he always does biopics. By the way, he did the Vincent Van Gogh
imagination. That's why he does biopics. That's why.
The Van Gogh one with Willem Dafoe was fucking phenomenal.
It's my favorite of his films.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I've seen them all, because if Basquiat and Before Night Falls and this,
I'll admit that maybe
that's the
He
filmography, right?
did a documentary called Berlin.
No, I will admit
Right.
I'm a little colored by
The
his fine
Berlin
art stuff,
one.
but I think he's a fraud, and I think this film is less than some of its parts. I think the one thing that makes this film work was Janusz Kaminski. It was his cinematography in the first 40 minutes of the film that made this thing soar. In fact, his photography makes this entire film worthwhile. It's a pointless film.
But also,
again,
like Chris said, the performances are phenomenal across the
the
board.
guy did a great job. I mean, the guy, I forgot his name, and I thought Max von Sydow was actually one of my favorites.
That's actually that might be my favorite scene.
Max
he
von
can do
Sydow-
anything. He's like every
Well,
actor in the world
it's
should be
funny
intimidated
because
by this guy.
I saw his character as a successor to his artist in Hannah and Her Sisters.
Maybe.
If Jesus came back today, he'd never stop
The
throwing up.
scene where the scene
he
where
calls him on the phone.
the scene where he calls him on the phone. I could not
yeah.
make
Oh,
it through that
see,
scene. dude.
that was Cito, man. He could sell that stuff, man.
He
was
really
Eric
could. It
von
was
Sydow.
so
And
good.
dude, he does it
Really
in
good
Swedish,
actor.
in French, and English.
He
and
does it in
French.
genre
In genre-
pictures. He does it in high art movies.
I
He
know.
like it doesn't matter.
He
If
was in
you-
a Star Wars movie,
he
for
brings
God's
it.
sake. It's like
Yeah.
he can do
He
anything.
even was in an Academy Award-winning flick where he speaks Danish, and
I know, right?
said, "Yeah, his Danish is really weird, but you can sort of understand."
His French is weird too.
Yeah.
His
Yeah.
French is weird.
But nonetheless, he could do it all.
That's- yeah.
And I actually like the idea that the father actually loved the son and wanted and was proud of him, which is like you don't see that in movies anymore.
The
It's
shaving
always-
scene was beautiful for that
Especially in
reason.
French.
I
Yes,
thought
it was really great because it's
because
like,
it wasn't like, oh, here's their tortured relationship. It was like, no, they fucking love each other so
know.
much.
you
It's
don't
like,
see
this
it.
is
You
awesome.
don't see
Yeah.
it. That's the thing.
There are times where this movie does feel like it was made by a hipster from Brooklyn, because
Thank
this
you.
movie was made by a hipster from Brooklyn. And the place that I see that the most is in the music. The music in this movie sucks.
Uh-huh.
It sucks so bad, and it
I
takes
didn't
me.
notice it.
I like the
Oh,
music.
It
I like
took
the
me.
music.
It took me out of the movie every time because so much of it sounded like something this guy had on his iPod, and he was like,
It
"Yeah,
actually uses the same Bach piece that they use in Hannah and Her Sisters.
That's funny.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
thing, the most hipster part was this. It's like, oh, religion's so fake and bad, and I don't believe in it. And I edited for Elle magazine. What is religion?
Blinking Mary
Yeah.
is amazing."
You know what?
Mhm.
That's
Blinking
the
Mary's
most
great,
religious
but
thing I've seen.
It was
in
actually
years.
that was the only real joke in the film. Him saying the thing in the window, the thing that was a
Right.
great punchline.
Very special. It's a very special piece.
But still,
It's a very
it's
special-
his
It's
way.
The
Of,
lighting was
It
really
was
good.
blessed by a cardinal.
it was his way of denigrating his girlfriend. It was kind of wrong, you know.
Yeah, he's a
Well,
shithead.
yeah, he
He's a
does
shithead.
it just because to say "fuck you" to her.
The character is a shithead. Like,
is.
I
That's,
don't know that the movie disagrees with that concept.
No,
Yeah,
No, and I don't think he's an egregious shithead. Like he's maybe not perfect, but he's not like
He's like a
He's-
normal everyday.
Is this the shithead?
Yeah.
yeah, he's
Well,
not.
shithead or an egregious shithead?
right.
How's
He's
that
not.
work?
He's not calling people racist things on Twitter, but he's also not He's also not tipping. Like it's the
He
same.
probably
he's-
isn't. No.
It's
he's that
very,
guy.
it's very normal, obviously, in the French culture to have a wife and a lover, and then he's not like Alfie. I mean, he's not. He's not the best dude, but he's also not a total monster in
So
any
that
way,
makes
shape,
me
or form.
that makes me want to bring something up that they changed from the real story to this movie that it's completely weird to me. Is
Oh,
all
yeah,
the
I
shit
read this too.
where the mother of his children is the one who's there taking care of him along with the speech therapist.
Right.
She wasn't part of this.
Yeah, in real
His
life, it was the
girlfriend
girlfriend.
It was the
was the
girlfriend.
one who was
Why
there
flip
all
it?
the time.
I
Yeah,
didn't
the
know
wife.
that.
The wife stayed away in real life.
And the one who helped him write the book. She was the one who did the communication with him to write the book. Why would you take that away from that character and just make her, the ex-girlfriend on the phone in Panic Room? Like, it's such a weird.
I don't know why they did that either.
Right. I can't be in the room.
It didn't need to. It didn't need to be switched for dramatic purposes. It would have worked fine.
No.
And apparently, the family was very upset about it for obvious reasons.
Do you think
also they couldn't figure out which of the 3 kids they didn't want to cast, so they gave him 3 kids instead of 2?
That's right. I read that.
But like,
the thing is that the whole thing about
the kids broke my heart too, though, with the son when he was just crying, looking at him, just broke my heart.
It's awful. That brought, some of that stuff brought it home, which is nice. Him, when you're outside of him, people talking about him, you could see the situation, although God, French medical, the national medical care must be really great.
Also, how come all the nurses are smoking gorgeously hot?
Well, it is the Riviera
because they hire nurses.
Actually, that's Calais, isn't it? It's north.
Yeah. No. It's Berk.
You've been there?
It's right on the Belgian border. Right.
Okay.
So it's way up there near Dunkirk.
But that's also
Dunkirk.
that's also tourist.
Actually, in Belgium.
That's also tourist beach area. Yeah. So you're.
Because you saw that huge beach, right? When they take him out there.
Yeah.
And that
it's
nasty,
gigantic.
That nasty pea green ocean out there, the Grand Manche.
It's the what you call it,
the English Channel.
La Manche, they call it.
Yeah, the Grand Manche. Yeah.
But
it's almost not.
Scott, I'm kind of glad that you kind of stuck a pin in it, because I don't completely side with you and think that it's like the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah, I'm like 50% on board.
I'm carrying something into this, but please keep going.
Yeah, I get it. You have sort of
an axe to grind,
a class warfare axe to grind.
I do.
But
I get it.
I'm passionate.
But also making a movie. It's a rich guy making a movie about a rich guy. But setting that aside, I thought it was good, well made, well acted, interesting. It like Chris says, it puts you in kind of this horrible first person perspective. And makes I felt things. I was a little bored.
Yeah,
bored at times. A lot of reciting of the alphabet.
Oh boy,
I wasn't bored.
There's a lot of that.
I wasn't bored. I was actually.
I was never bored, and I think
the pacing was really good.
Judging this movie on something other than the movie itself, I think, is unfair. But everybody can do whatever they want.
No, I'm even taking.
I'm withholding my rant about facilitated communication, man.
Well, one thing is also like this whole thing builds up to I don't remember what happened during the accident, and when you see what happens during the accident, you see he has a stroke while driving the car. So what? I mean, it doesn't really change the narrative.
Change anything.
Yeah, it doesn't change anything. It's a false climax. The only real climax is when he dies.
It's weird calling it an accident. Yeah.
Well, whatever.
No, it wasn't an accident. He pulled over and
French
safely.
Doctors called it an accident.
I remembered the way I remembered.
How my uncle died. Actually,
I remember that being
driving his car in Boyd Springs.
I know. I'm the same, Chris. I thought that happened in the beginning when I first saw it too.
Could have happened. Like I would have put that all the way at the beginning. That the way I remembered it. Misremembered it.
Yeah.
Me too. It's funny that I misremembered it this way.
Well, it was a false mystery. It's like, how did this happen? And you had to wait to the end of the film to find out how it happened. And
it didn't matter.
Exactly.
Oh, pretty much how he imagined. He had a stroke.
An extended scene of the Greenland ice sheet collapsing into the ocean plays a little bit differently in 2022 than it did in 2007. Also,
that has not aged well or aged better. I can't tell which.
Well, there's something about. See, in the end, though, he runs the footage backwards.
Why do you think he did that?
I think because
that was like a film school move, I thought.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's also obviously, I mean, it's maybe not subtle, but I think it's because he finally has release as a person, as a character, and it's sort of some kind of repair of sorts.
Yeah,
it's setting the world, so I think that the imagery, even though maybe it is a little gimmicky, but it's a powerful image of watching those things go back together.
I don't feel like I understand what you're saying, and I think that is probably what he was going for, but I don't think the film justified that. Like, I don't feel like where he ends up as a character justifies that.
Right.
It doesn't. That those two, you can't sort of square that because they're in different places.
I mean, he didn't get repaired. He died of
No,
pneumonia.
He
and I
dies
think-
2 days after the book comes out without
But-
ever really being
there's
able to communicate with
no-
anyone other than his girlfriend and the speech therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think they painted a picture of someone who, I don't think this is necessarily about this character who was in such disrepair that he needed to be repaired in the way that the glaciers are at the end. What I think is more happening here is you have someone who is, I mean, aside from being somebody in the fashion world, who is very sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like normal. Like but what we're exploring here is maybe anyone's death or anyone's downfall here, and how that can mean something to whoever is directly involved in that.
Yeah,
I don't buy it that he's a real asshole too. I think he's just a.
I don't
sort of
either. Like
person.
going back to the dad footage and the dad scenes, you know.
Right.
I mean, yeah, he had a mistress, and the wife clearly didn't really love that.
No.
But
he had a lot of money to take care of both of them.
Also, that's not his wife. She's the mother of his children.
Correct.
But
right, they're not married.
They're
maybe?
not in. They're actually not even
he
in a
never married
relationship.
her,
Right.
which is very.
But how do you? But I guess I think that the movie sort of is exploring just death in general, and he is the main character, obviously, but it's not that, oh, you know, he had this unusual journey than anyone else, although he sort of did, but. You know, I'm sure this kind of happens to a lot of people, not this specific syndrome, but
locked-in syndrome is extremely rare.
Right.
Now, mind you,
Extraordinarily
the
rare.
one thing I got out of this, even though, like I said, I didn't really like a lot of how it was put together, and I thought it
yet
was
he
kind of a
liked
meandering,
us.
pointless film, it came out of it really just admiring what this guy who had locked-in syndrome did. He wrote a goddamn book.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck.
It was
I mean,
a short book.
if I ever get a situation like that, I want to be able to write a book.
It's more of a pamphlet.
That was sheer force of will and luck.
was
And
trying just to get-
I was very impressed by that.
They didn't do this, but like there's a missing 2 hours of this movie, which is just him trying to figure out how to initially communicate. Like,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
okay, here's the alphabet. What do you have to say? And he's like,
Well, you do get that when she first sits down with him to
He
start.
can't think of
He
what to
doesn't have
say.
anything
right.
to
Good in
say.
that situation because there's no. It was
I don't know.
Well, the first thing he says is, "I want death."
Yeah, I want death. Probably would have been my answer.
Well,
Like,
that's the trajectory of the
Kill
character. He
me.
starts out wanting to die, and then after a while, he has his book to write, and when it's done, he dies. It's
Right.
almost.
Where's Will
It
Sampson?
almost sounds
Needham?
fictional, you know what I mean? But it's not. It really happened. You know,
Yeah.
and that's impressive.
there's a very good case to be made that facilitated communication, and this is a form of facilitated communication, is not real, and it's entirely the facilitator who's creating the message.
Interesting.
It's
not
all
like the
it's
Ouija
all
board.
subconscious. It's exactly like a Ouija board.
It's a Ouija board.
It's all
effect.
subconscious. They believe that they're doing it, but when you test them and you give information to the person who's having the facilitated communication done, and you don't give it to the facilitator, they are never able to answer the question.
Wow.
How would you do a rewrite of a page after you get it up?
I was wondering that exact same thing.
How do you tell him what a paragraph is?
Do you like this sentence? Do you like this sentence? Do you like this sentence?
Well, he's
Yes.
supposed to blink rapidly at the end of a
yeah.
No, I get it,
Yeah.
and they could have belabored even more the alphabet stuff, but all I could think about as it was happening was, how would this work? How would
It's
that
like
work?
in the old days, you know, before word processors, when you had to actually cut and paste shit
Mm.
on pieces of paper, you tended to write things a little more
Carefully.
carefully.
I understand it from reading. He tried his best every time before the person would show up to kind of have, at least mentally,
He
the
mentions it
day's
in the
page
movie, right?
in his head.
Yeah, good.
He mentions that at the beginning of
Yeah.
the whole thing where he's going to write
Yeah.
this book.
I also love how we can hear his inner is, you know, the whole beginning of the movie, he's talking. I mean, it's just his inner monologue that
When
we're
you hear it,
hearing.
That was really
He's a
wonderful.
smartass.
But yeah, I loved that because he and the whole thing is like, I just said my name, can't you hear me? You know, that whole, I just liked that execution of that exploration of that, because
I did too.
it really makes him even more sympathetic as a character.
Same here. If they get stuck with that POV thing for the entire film, it would have been one of
Oh
masterpieces.
God, it would have been real tough watch.
Yeah.
Around the time this movie came out, they did a House episode about locked-in syndrome, and
Oh, wow.
Most Def plays the guy with locked-in syndrome,
Hmm.
and it's the same thing where he wakes up in the hospital, he tries to talk, he can't talk, no one can hear him. They think he's brain dead. House is in the same hospital because he wrecked his bike.
Mhm.
And he realizes that the guy has locked-in syndrome, and like you
Yeah.
watch, and almost all of it, I believe, is done from first person, and it works much better as a 44-minute TV episode than I think it would have in the case of an hour and 40-minute movie.
Okay, well, there it is.
I like this movie almost as much.
I guess we can go to. You don't have a corner, Jim, or you think you've kind of you're active.
Wait, Scott, you stepped on Chris there for a second. What, he liked it almost as.
I did not. I thought he trailed off.
My
Sorry.
issues are all like super minor at this point. I like this movie almost as much as I did the first time I saw it. I think it's
Okay.
beautiful. It's fucking horrifying and beautiful.
See, that's what I got, John. That's what I
Yeah,
got.
I cried a lot. I cried a lot this time.
All right. I guess we can do thumbs.
Jim? No?
I liked it.
No, sorry.
Jim's corner.
I love.
Thumbs
But
up.
with a finger up for cinematography. I thought this was one of the most beautiful
Yeah.
Yeah,
films
it
I've
was
seen in
good
a long time.
cinematography.
I said
But-
I 50% agreed with Scott. This is me 50% agreeing
Yeah.
with Scott.
So
Hey.
okay.